Ever feel like the foundational ideas shaping our world are just out of reach?
Yeah, like there's this whole layer of thought underneath everything.
Exactly. And you feel it influences things, but you haven't quite grasped it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today, we're diving deep into the work of a thinker who absolutely shook the foundations of 19th century thought.
Oh, yeah.
And his impact, well, you still feel it today, whether you realize it or not. Friedrich Nietzsche.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, we're really going to explore the core of Nietzsche's philosophy.
Good.
We'll be drawing from the text, A Philosophia de Friedrich Nietzsche. It's really helpful for getting to grips with his most important ideas.
And why they still matter.
Exactly. Why they continue to resonate.
So our mission today is pretty simple, really. We want to unpack Nietzsche's key concepts.
Yeah.
In a way that gives you a real understanding of why he was such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Cutting through some of the density.
Right. We want to cut through the academic stuff, maybe give you a bit of a shortcut to appreciating his profound influence.
And just to paint a quick picture, who is this guy? Friedrich Nietzsche, he was a German philologist.
A language scholar, basically.
Right, a scholar of language and a philosopher, lived 1844 to 1900.
Okay.
And he's probably most famous for declaring the death of God.
That's the big one.
And his pretty radical call to reevaluate all of our existing values.
It's interesting, because he came from that world, philology.
Yeah.
Some traditional philosophers, well, they didn't always take him seriously at first, did they?
No, not always. But
Okay.
he ended up becoming hugely popular.
And influential, way beyond those academic circles.
Definitely. I think his writing style had a lot to do with it. It's really engaging, almost aphoristic.
Like philosophical proverbs or something. Very quotable.
Exactly. Very quotable. Okay, so let's dive in. Where should we start to get a handle on his thinking?
Where's the entry point?
I think a great place to begin is with his early work, specifically The Birth of Tragedy from 1872.
Yeah.
Because here, he introduces this really fascinating contrast, these two fundamental forces he saw at play.
Ah, the Apollonian and the Dionysian.
Exactly. The Dionysian and the Apollonian.
Right, so the Dionysian, as Nietzsche saw it,
Yeah.
that was all about the irrational. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The irrational, the chaotic, that raw creative life force.
Like pure, untamed energy. Existence itself.
Think of it like a wild, ecstatic dance, that kind of energy.
Okay, got it. And then the Apollonian.
And in direct contrast, you've got the Apollonian. That represents the critical distance of reason.
Structure, order.
Yeah, that more structured aspect, maybe even distancing. It lets us perceive and understand the world in a more ordered way.
Like.
Think of it like a beautifully sculpted statue, perfect form.
Okay, so it's this constant tension, this push and pull between these two ways of experiencing the world.
A fundamental tension, yeah.
Now, moving on from that, another really central concept, maybe the central concept for him, is the will to power.
Ah, yes, the will to power. It's crucial.
What's the core of that idea? It sounds aggressive.
Well, it can sound that way, but it's broader. Nietzsche saw it as this vital force that precedes and drives all of human existence, even all life.
Precedes existence.
Yeah, he built on some ideas from Schopenhauer here. But it's really important to understand it's not just about, wanting political control or dominance.
Okay, so not just wanting to be the boss.
No, it's much more fundamental, an inherent drive within all living things. To grow, to overcome challenges.
To assert themselves.
To assert themselves in the world, exactly. It's about striving, becoming, overcoming.
Interesting. So it's a much broader, almost metaphysical idea.
In a way, yes.
Now, this idea, the will to power, it really connects with maybe his most famous, certainly most provocative idea.
The death of God.
Death of God. Yeah, this is the one everyone talks about when they talk about Nietzsche.
It is. It's absolutely pivotal, and it's so important to understand what he actually meant by it.
Right. He wasn't saying, like, a literal God just died.
No, not literally. It signifies this growing recognition, this dawning awareness in humanity.
That what?
That we now have to take full responsibility for our own lives, for our own values.
Without relying on divine authority.
Exactly. Relying on our own effort, our own will. Think about it. So many of our current political, ethical debates,
Yeah.
they really stem from this loss of a universally accepted moral authority. Nietzsche saw this coming.
And the way we grapple with right and wrong today, that's part of his legacy.
In many ways, yes. He diagnosed the condition.
Right. And he lays this out with such powerful language. In the Gay Science, wasn't it? 1882?
That's the one.
I mean, those quotes just grab you. Haven't we heard the noise of the gravediggers burying God?
Mm-hmm.
Don't we smell the stench of divine putrefaction? For even gods putrefy.
Powerful imagery.
God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. How should we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? I mean, wow. Pretty intense stuff.
It really is. And Nietzsche, he saw himself as the messenger here.
The messenger of this huge shift in understanding.
Right. Not the one who actually caused it. He actually traced the origins of this death much further back.
Further back than the 19th century.
Oh, yeah. Even back to the shift away from a geocentric view of the universe. Back to Copernicus.
Copernicus, wow, that's a fascinating connection. Unchaining the Earth from the sun. How did he link that scientific revolution to the death of God?
Well, he saw it as the beginning of this process, a profound disorientation for humanity.
Disorientation.
Yeah. As he asks in The Gay Science, remember, what did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now?
Right, whither are we moving? Away from all suns.
Are we not plunging continually backward, sideward, forward in all directions?
Is there still any up or down?
Oh, yeah.
Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing?
Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder?
Chilling.
Think about it. For centuries, we thought Earth was the center, a privileged spot in a divinely ordered cosmos. Copernicus showed us, nope, we're not. This initial decentering of humanity,
Was the first crack.
Nietzsche argued it was the first crack in the foundation of that divinely ordered world. And that eventually led to this feeling that God is dead, that the old certainties just don't hold anymore.
It's like pulling the rug out from under everything people believed in for centuries.
Absolutely, a seismic shift.
Now, there's often this misconception, isn't there? That because of this death of God idea, Nietzsche himself was a nihilist.
Right, that he celebrated meaninglessness.
But that's not quite right, is it?
No, not at all. Nietzsche was actually a really sharp critic of 19th century European nihilism.
Oh, okay.
He saw it as a dangerous consequence, this erosion of traditional beliefs, thanks to rising nationalism, science.
But without anything to replace them.
Exactly, without offering any compelling new set of values. So he wasn't celebrating the void, he was pointing out the huge challenge it presented.
Okay, so he wasn't just tearing down, he was grappling with what comes next.
Precisely.
And he was particularly critical of Christianity in this context, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Nietzsche believed that Christianity, with its heavy emphasis on an afterlife,
On a heaven paradise.
yeah, it actually devalued this life, earthly life. The whole concept of paradise, he argued, makes life here seem less significant.
But just a waiting room.
Kind of. A mere stepping stone to something better. And in his view, this undermined our will to embrace and affirm this life right now.
So it corrupted the will, degraded earthly values.
That was his critique, and it's from this standpoint that he thought humanity needed to step up, take responsibility for creating its own meaning, its own values.
Okay, so out of this death of God, this critique of existing values, emerges this idea of the Übermensch,
The Übermensch, yes.
often translated as Overman or Superman. What exactly did Nietzsche envision here?
Well, the Übermensch is Nietzsche's vision of humanity evolving, going beyond its present state.
Evolving how?
By overcoming limitations, achieving self-mastery, and really fully embracing and exercising that will to power we talked about. Okay.
But crucially, the Übermensch is also the creator of their own values.
Connecting back to the death of God.
Exactly. They actively reject the pre-established Christian morality, bourgeois morality, which Nietzsche saw as fundamentally life-denying.
So instead of just Superman, like flying around.
No. Think of it more as the constant becoming of oneself.
Becoming.
Yeah. In a world that's saturated with external validation, needing approval, Nietzsche pushes us to find that strength, that value within.
So the Übermensch is less a destination, more a journey.
I think so. A lifelong journey of self-creation, which feels, profoundly relevant today in our age of constant self-optimization and comparison.
So it's not about being biologically superior, like some later misinterpretation suggested.
Definitely not.
It's more about a spiritual, intellectual self-overcoming, having the courage, the independence to forge your own moral compass.
Precisely. to say this is what I value without relying on some external authority, be it God or society.
And he really dug into this idea of morality in his later works, didn't he? Oh, yes. In Beyond Good and Evil, that's 1886, and Genealogy of Morality, the year after.
Yeah.
He delved really deeply into the history, the evolution of our moral concepts, offering perspectives that were, frankly, incredibly influential.
And still debated today.
Absolutely. Thinkers like Michel Foucault later built on this work, examining how power structures shape our whole understanding of right and wrong.
And the text mentions a connection here to something called Laban's philosophy of life.
Yeah, it's interesting. Nietzsche shared some concerns with that movement. Thinkers like Henri Bergson, who also really emphasized the importance of lived experience, intuition, vitality, not just abstract reason.
Fascinating. Okay, so another key concept, maybe even more enigmatic, the idea of eternal recurrence.
Ah, yes, eternal recurrence, or eternal return.
What's the essence of this? It sounds heavy.
It is heavy, and it's central to his ethics, although, as our source text points out, it's maybe more implied than systematically laid out in Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
That's the book published between 1883 and 1885, with the Zarathustra figure.
Exactly. Based on the ancient Persian prophet Zoroaster, he goes up the mountain, contemplates, and comes down to teach.
Right.
And the idea, eternal recurrence, imagine a cosmic Groundhog Day.
Okay.
But instead of just one day repeating your entire life, every single joy, every sorrow, every thought, every action, everything plays out again and again and again for eternity. Exactly the same way.
Right.
Now, this wasn't necessarily meant as like a literal prediction of physics.
Or the thought experiment.
Powerful thought experiment, yes.
And didn't Nietzsche have a pretty complex relationship with the composer Richard Wagner around this time?
He did. Very complex. He hugely admired Wagner initially, saw that Dionysian spirit in his music.
But then
he broke with him quite decisively. And it's interesting, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche has Zarathustra yearn for the nuptial ring of rings, the ring of return.
The ring of return.
In his profound love for eternity. This phrase, "O eternity," and the whole idea of everything coming back, it's a recurring motif.
Zarathustra even says something about pleasure wanting itself, wanting eternity.
Yeah. Pleasure, however, does not want heirs nor children. Pleasure wants itself, wants eternity, wants recurrence, wants everything eternally the same as itself. It's intense.
So how should we really understand this? It's mind-bending.
Well, essentially, Nietzsche presents it as a kind of post-theistic imperative.
An imperative, like a command.
Sort of. A challenge for how to live your life in a world without God, without external validation. You know Kant's categorical imperative.
Act only according to principles you'd want as universal laws.
Right. Nietzsche takes it a step further, maybe inward. Act as if every single action, every single moment of your life
will be repeated eternally.
Exactly. It's a radical way to evaluate your life, your choices. Could you truly want to live this exact life with all its good and bad over and over again forever?
Wow. That's a really heavy thought. It really forces you to confront your choices, your values, doesn't it?
It's the most direct way possible.
And the text mentions this as Nietzsche's way of overcoming nihilism.
Exactly. It's his antidote, his way of imbuing life with meaning, with weight, with significance, without needing a divine command or a preordained purpose.
And it laid the groundwork for later existentialists.
Absolutely. For thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, who explored the nature of being, existence, radical freedom, responsibility, they were heavily influenced by this idea of confronting the potential eternal return.
So Nietzsche's constantly challenging us.
Yeah.
Confront these big questions of existence and then
asking, okay, given all this, now what? What will you do? How will you live?
Now, while we're grappling with these really, really big ideas, it's important to remember the person behind them, too.
Yeah, the man himself.
Nietzsche's life, it was quite tumultuous, marked by significant challenges, wasn't it?
It was indeed. He struggled pretty much his whole adult life with fragile health, debilitating migraines, other ailments.
Yet he produced this incredible body of work.
An immense amount of intellectual energy, yeah. Constantly challenging the prevailing culture, the ideas of his time.
And this dedication, it cost him his academic career.
Ultimately, yes. After only about 10 years teaching classical philology, he resigned.
And just focused on writing.
Devoted himself entirely to writing, wandering through Europe, actually, often seeking climates that might, offer some relief from his physical suffering.
And his personal relationships, they were also quite complex, sometimes difficult.
Oh, yes. The text mentions that famous complicated love triangle.
With Lou André Salome and Paul Ray.
That's the one. Ultimately quite painful for him, and his relationship with his younger sister, Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche.
That was significant.
Very significant, and, well, tragically so in many ways.
Oh, sorry.
She held these strong nationalist, anti-Semitic views, things completely at odds with Nietzsche's own thinking.
And she later played a role in his legacy.
A highly problematic role, yes. We'll definitely need to come back to that.
Okay. And sadly, his later years were marked by this really devastating decline, mentally and physically.
Tragically so, yes. After a sudden mental collapse in Turin, Italy. That was 1889.
The incident with the horse, is that true?
Famously, perhaps apocryphally, associated with seeing a horse being mistreated, yes. After that, Nietzsche spent the rest of his life, about 11 years.
In what state?
In a state of profound mental incapacity. He was cared for by his mother and then later by his sister Elizabeth.
And the cause?
It's now widely believed to be the effects of tertiary syphilis, complicated by a series of strokes. It led to his death in 1900.
Which brings us, unfortunately, to a really critical and, frankly, disturbing point.
The misappropriation.
The subsequent misappropriation of Nietzsche's work, particularly by the Nazis in Germany. This is a really dark chapter.
It is. A deeply disturbing chapter in his intellectual legacy. His sister, Elizabeth.
The one with the nationalist views?
Yes. After his mental breakdown, she gained significant control over his unpublished writings, his notes, his literary estate. She established the Nietzsche Archive.
And what did she do with it?
She deliberately, unscrupulously edited his work, took fragments completely out of context, twisted things.
To what end?
To align his philosophy with the hateful ideology of Nazism.
Wow.
That widely circulated photograph, the deeply disturbing one of Adolf Hitler posing with a bust of Nietzsche.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's just a potent, tragic symbol of this gross manipulation.
But the text makes it very clear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nietzsche himself would have been absolutely horrified by this.
Horrified, absolutely. Nietzsche vehemently detested German nationalism and anti-Semitism.
So what were his politics, if any?
If he had any kind of political leaning, it was much more that of an individualist, almost an aristocratic aesthete, deep reverence for art, culture.
And his writing style played a role here, too.
Definitely. Irony was crucial for him. He was often a sharp, sometimes hilarious critic of those in power, of prevailing trends.
Not exactly Nazi material.
Yeah. Not at all. In his emphasis on individual self-overcoming, his critique of herd morality, he actually shares some ground with an earlier figure in existentialism, Søren Kierkegaard.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, Kierkegaard also stood apart from the dominant ideologies of his time, emphasizing individual faith and subjective truth. Both were critics of conformity.
So it's crucial to understand this historical context.
Yeah.
Because those out-of-context quotes,
often lifted from his concise aphoristic style,
they're deliberately used to create this completely false picture of him as a proto-fascist and anti-Semite.
Precisely. His biographer, Rüdiger Safransky, who's excellent, he recounts how even a Nazi philosopher, Ernst Krieg, while trying to claim Nietzsche for their cause, Krieg had to admit Nietzsche's fundamental opposition to socialism, nationalism, and racial ideology.
He admitted it.
Yeah. Krieg even remarked chillingly that without these inclinations, Nietzsche could have been an extraordinary Nazi.
Wow. That just underscores how twisted it all was.
Exactly, how fundamentally they perverted his actual philosophical project.
So, okay, looking back at this complex, often misunderstood body of work, what would you say is his most lasting, his truly important contribution? How did he change how we think?
That's a great question. I believe his greatest contribution lies more in how he taught us to think, rather than necessarily what specific doctrines to believe.
How to think.
Yeah. He emphasized the crucial importance of examining problems, assumptions from multiple perspectives, constantly questioning received wisdom,
Looking at things from different angles.
seeking out new, often unconventional angles to get a deeper, more nuanced understanding of ourselves, of the world.
And the text mentions music and dance being important in his philosophy.
Incredibly significant, yes. They recur as metaphors, as themes. They represent a more intuitive, embodied, a Dionysian path to knowledge. Exactly. Something that goes beyond just pure, abstract, rational intellect.
The text even mentions that anecdote, maybe true, maybe not, about him dancing naked.
Ah, yes, that one. And his quote from Thus Spoke Zarathustra is just so vivid. I could only believe in a God who knew how to dance.
It's evocative, isn't it? It captures something essential about his spirit.
It really does. And we absolutely cannot forget the sheer visceral power of his language.
No.
Like that unforgettable quote from The Gay Science we mentioned earlier. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers?
It's a question that still echoes, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It resonates so deeply with the challenges of finding meaning today.
Absolutely.
And his sharp critique of philosophers who lack a sense of history.
Mm-hmm.
That also feels incredibly relevant.
Oh, definitely. This idea that they project their own contemporary understanding of human nature back onto the past, treat it as some eternal truth.
As if people haven't changed.
Exactly. As he put it so well in Human All Too Human, all philosophers share this common failing. They start out from man as he is now.
And assume that they can arrive at their goal by an analysis of this man.
They automatically project man as an eternal truth, as the surest yardstick of things.
But it's just a snapshot.
Right. Everything the philosopher has declared about man is, in the end, no more than a testimony about the man of a very limited period. That lack of historical perspective, he argued, leads to big errors.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together then, for you, our listener. We've taken a pretty deep dive into some really significant core ideas from Nietzsche.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We explored that fascinating tension he saw, the Apollonian versus the Dionysian.
The creative chaos and the rational order.
That fundamental driving force he called the will to power.
The drive to grow, overcome, assert.
The huge intellectual shift represented by the death of God.
And the radical responsibility that puts on us.
Right. We looked at his vision of the Übermensch, not Superman, but this ideal of self-overcoming, creating your own values.
Yeah, forging your own path.
And that challenging ethical framework of eternal recurrence, that thought experiment.
Living as if every moment would repeat forever. Yeah.
And hopefully, through exploring all this, you can now see how understanding these ideas, well, it offers a really valuable perspective.
A thought-provoking perspective for navigating the complexities of our own world, for sure.
Nietzsche compels us to think critically, doesn't he? To question assumptions, even our own.
And to take ownership of the values that guide our lives. It's about those moments of insight, those aha moments you get from wrestling with these big ideas.
Ideas that are still incredibly relevant.
Absolutely.
So this deep dive, we really hope it's provided you with a concise but still thorough understanding of this hugely influential, often misunderstood philosopher.
And his enduring impact on how we think.
All without getting too bogged down in, overly academic language.
Hopefully we kept it accessible.
So, considering Nietzsche's powerful concept of the eternal return, here's a final, maybe unsettling thought for you to ponder.
Okay, lay it on us.
What single action or maybe aspect of your life right now would you most want to relive endlessly, exactly as it is? And what does your answer to that question reveal about your deepest values, about how you are truly living right now?
Wow. That's a question that really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It does. And as always, there are just so many deeper layers to explore here. Countless connections to be made when you start engaging with these kinds of profound ideas.
Always more to uncover.
So we'd encourage you to continue to consider how Nietzsche's insights might connect with other areas of thought, maybe, with the challenges we face today.
Or just with your own personal journey.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.